Imagine a place where the land breathes secrets older than language, where the horizon yawns out in every direction, unbroken, untamed, and utterly indifferent to your presence. This isn't a metaphor. It's the truth about the Australian Outback, where the earth doesn't just lie beneath your feet. It looms. It watches. It waits. The road narrows into dust long before you realize you've crossed a line. One moment you're among petrol stations, roadside diners, and signs with town names. The next, it's just the hum of tires over red dirt and the low whine of wind pressing against the side of your car. Everything man-made begins to feel temporary, small. You see the remnants of those who came before. Half-collapsed fences, rusted machinery sunken into the soil, and forgotten shacks that seem held together only by memory and spiderwebs. They say the Outback is beautiful, and it is, staggeringly so. But it's not the kind of beauty you linger in. It's the kind that strips you down, leaves your skin dry and your mouth full of iron. The light at dusk turns the ground to fire and the sky to bruises. The silence becomes so thick you can hear your heartbeat against your eardrums. And when night falls, it's not just darkness. It's the erasure of all distance. You light a fire not for warmth, but to anchor yourself in a world that suddenly feels too vast to hold you. People disappear here. That's not folklore. That's fact. Men, women, children. Locals and travelers. Experienced bushmen and day trippers. Some of them were last seen walking into the trees for a moment of privacy. Others never made it past the next bend in the road. Their cars are found parked, engines cool, radios still tuned to the last bit of talkback, but they are gone. Cleanly, quietly. You might think there'd be panic, mass concern, urgency in the wake of such vanishings. Sometimes there is, briefly. Search parties are formed, helicopters fly overhead. Trackers comb the ridges, but more often than not it ends the same way, with nothing. No footprints, no torn fabric, no dropped items or broken branches. Just the whisper of wind and the crunch of dry leaves under boots too late. And here's the part that chills even those who've lived their whole lives out here. Many of the locals don't want to talk about it. Not in a defiant way, in a reverent one. It's not that they don't believe something is happening. It's that they do, and they understand the rules. They speak of the land like a living thing, not poetic metaphor, but bone-deep truth. A thing that gives and takes, that tests, that remembers. The bush, they say, has moods. Places where your compass spins, or your dog won't enter. Trees that creak when there's no wind. Lights that flicker out at the edge of vision. Sounds that mimic your name. And always, always that silence. So loud it drowns out reason. What draws people into these places? What makes a man step off a trail, leave his gear behind, abandon his car with the door still ajar? Theories abound. Illness, sunstroke, foul play. But theories don't explain the absence. They don't explain the certainty, in some hearts, that the Outback isn't just wild, it's watching. Tonight we begin not with answers, but with an invitation to lean in, to listen, to walk the dusty edge of the known and peer into the silence beyond it. Because what follows isn't just a recounting of missing persons, it's a confession of sorts, from a land that doesn't speak with words, but with absence, with echo, with mystery. And once you hear it, you'll never forget the sound of nothing. There's a quiet list in Australia, long, mostly forgotten, buried beneath news cycles and bureaucratic reports. It's a list of names, people who went for a walk, a drive, a bit of air, people who left their houses one morning and never came back. And unlike stories from foreign woods and snowy peaks, these aren't urban legends or tales passed down in shadows. These are real names, real families, real questions without answer. It starts with a number. Hundreds, if you trust the records. Thousands, if you speak to the ones still searching. The official channels call them disappearances. Unexplained, unsolved, sometimes presumed dead, sometimes left in limbo. What ties them together is not just the lack of resolution, but the eerie consistency in the circumstances. No signs of struggle, no evidence of intent, just gone. Now, disappearing in the wild isn't rare in itself. Nature is cruel and fast. People get lost, make mistakes, misjudge distances, misread maps. But in the Australian bush, the disappearances take on a different shape. It's not just misfortune, it's something uncanny. A pattern without symmetry. a puzzle with the corners missing. Many of these vanishings occur in national parks and protected reserves, alpine regions, rugged coastlines, desolate plains where phone signals die, and even birds seem to hesitate. Rescue teams report the same strangeness: tracks that end abruptly, dogs that refuse to follow, gear that seems misplaced rather than dropped. You could chalk it up to chaos, to the randomness of fear, but it happens too often and in too many different terrain to be ignored. And then there's the silence that surrounds it, not just from the land itself, but from people. Rangers who don't like to talk about certain areas, locals who lower their voices when speaking of those spots. Even some of the families, over time, begin to speak less, as if naming the mystery too often gives it power. But why? Why the quiet? Maybe it's grief, maybe it's superstition, or maybe, just maybe, it's because deep down, some understand that the bush doesn't always play by human rules. That there are places in this country where logic thins, where reality softens at the edges, where the land reclaims not just the body, but the story. Some speculate foul play, criminals using the bush as their cover. Others believe in accidents, in mental health crises, in people walking away from lives they couldn't bear. And sometimes, sure, those theories hold. But the core of the mystery is how cleanly these people vanish. No last words, no goodbyes, no trail. It's the absence that haunts. And the more you learn about these cases, the more you start to see it's not about any one person. It's about the pattern, the pull, the way the land seems to invite them, absorb them, then shrug its shoulders and carry on. What makes someone step into the bush without turning back? Perhaps the real question is, what is it they see when they get there? Conrad Whitlock was not a man who vanished easily. At 72, he'd lived a life of discipline and careful routine. A quiet man with quiet habits, garden in the morning, crossword by 10, tea by 3. He wasn't the type to get lost, and certainly not the type to vanish into the wild, but that's exactly what he did. It began with a car crash. Minor, no injuries. But something shifted in him after that. Subtle at first. He grew distracted, forgetful. Then came the headaches. Then the internet searches. Not about his garden or retirement. No, these were different. Memory loss. Amnesia. Scientology brain control. His wife thought it strange. So did his doctor. But no one expected what came next. One night in March 2019, Conrad got into his car and drove into the mountains. He told no one. Took nothing but his coat. The BMW was found days later, parked neatly on the side of a remote road in Mount Buller. The engine cold. The driver's seat empty. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, covering the ground. Tracks led from the car and into the dense bush. They didn't lead back. The first search was swift. The terrain wasn't easy, steep, icy, unforgiving. But the assumption was basic. He'd wandered, maybe injured, maybe confused. They expected to find him huddled beneath a tree, waiting. But there was no Conrad. Not then. Not ever. As days passed, the search became a ritual. Helicopters droned overhead. Searchers combed ravines. Drones scanned from above. Not a shred. Not a sock. Not a note. It was as if the mountain had swallowed him whole. Police leaned toward a medical explanation. A sudden neurological episode. Disorientation. He wandered and succumbed to exposure. Simple. Tragic. Logical. But simple logic doesn't sit well with the details. Why that road? Why leave without telling anyone? Why the strange searches? Why vanish with such precision in terrain Conrad had never walked? And then came the gaps in the timeline. Witnesses recalled a figure walking down the road days later. Tall, coat flapping in the... But no one could confirm it was him. No CCTV, no conclusive sightings. Just speculation. Just fog. Some believe Conrad was fleeing something. That the crash had rattled more than bones. That he sensed a breakdown coming. Tried to outrun it. Others think he was pulled toward the mountain by something deeper. Something less explainable. But among the searchers, there's a whisper that creeps in around the third or fourth day of looking. A feeling, not of danger, but of being unwelcome. The terrain shifts, the cold deepens, radios crackle, dogs refuse to go forward. It's like walking into a place that doesn't want you there, a place that watches. And if Conrad walked into such a place, drawn by confusion or something more primal, maybe he didn't get lost. Maybe he found what he was looking for, or what was looking for him. To this day, not a single trace has surfaced. No clothing, no bones, just his name, etched into the silence of a mountain that forgets nothing and reveals even less. Niels Becker wasn't new to the wild. He was the sort of man you'd trust with a compass in one hand and a snakebite kit in the other. Mid-30s, fit, meticulous. The kind who prepped for every hike like it was a military operation. And yet, even a man like Niels can vanish without a trace in the embrace of the Alpine National Park. In October of 2009, he set off for what was meant to be a 5-day solo trek through rugged forested terrain near Mount Sterling. Nothing extravagant, just Niels, his gear, and the bush. His last message was a text, quiet and casual. Heading to Mount Sterling, back to the car Sunday. That was Thursday. No red flags, no sense of farewell. Just another trip. But Sunday came, then Monday, and no sign of Niels. His family waited, growing anxious. By Tuesday, they called it in, and by Wednesday, the largest search in recent local memory had begun. They found his car, parked just where he said it'd be, locked, undisturbed, but no Niels. Helicopters circled, ground crews moved in grids, dogs scoured trails. They found nothing. Not a boot, not a wrapper, not a scrap of clothing. Just bush. And more bush. Some believe he simply fell victim to the elements. That a wrong turn became a fatal one. That the terrain, dense, steep, chaotic, claimed him like it had so many others. But that doesn't explain the silence, the lack of clues, the absence of even the smallest thread. Niels wasn't careless. He left breadcrumbs, figuratively and literally. Friends say he always used GPS, always carried a beacon, always left notes on his maps. But this time, everything failed. Even the scent dogs seemed to hesitate, confused, as if the trail just stopped, like a page torn from a book mid-sentence. And then there's the terrain itself. Those who walk it say there are places where the air feels thick, where the trees seem older than the soil beneath them, where compasses spin just a little, and footsteps feel too loud. Places where even seasoned hikers have turned back without knowing why. Could Niels have stumbled into one of these thin places? Places where the world seems to tilt, just slightly, and time forgets to move forward? There were rumors, as always, that he was running from something, that he faked it, started a new life. But they never held. Niels had a job he loved, a life he'd built, a family he texted regularly. He wasn't a ghost in waiting. He was rooted, solid, and yet, he's gone. The police eventually stood down. The gear was never found. The bush, indifferent as ever, rolled on. Seasons changed. Leaves fell. But the mountain remembered. It always does. And those who go hiking there now? Some stop near where his last signal might have been. They look into the trees. Listen. Wonder. Some say the place is cursed. Others say it's sacred. But most just say the same thing, quietly before moving on. Niels shouldn't have disappeared. But he did. Warren Meyer didn't fit the image of a man who goes missing in the wild. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't young and foolish. He wasn't running from anything. He was a father, a husband, a businessman, a man with structure. And on Easter Sunday of 2008, he disappeared without a whisper on a simple walk through the Yarra Ranges. A walk that should have taken no more than an hour. A walk from which he never returned. It started like any other day. Meyer said goodbye to his wife, promised to be back by lunchtime. He was heading to Dom Dom's Saddle, a scenic spot in the forest, popular among locals for its gentle trails and towering eucalypts. He parked his car with care, locked it, and set off with nothing more than a water bottle and a map. The kind of hike people take every weekend. The kind that never ends like this. By evening, when he still hadn't returned, the alarm was raised. Police began with optimism. Perhaps he'd injured himself. Maybe just lost his way. The area had mobile reception in patches. People got turned around, but not forever. But hours turned into days. The search grew frantic. What unfolded next remains one of the most thorough and fruitless searches in Victoria's history. Helicopters combed the skies. Ground teams moved shoulder to shoulder through bush so thick you couldn't see more than a meter ahead. Dogs, trackers, drones, thermal imaging. But Meyer had vanished, as if he'd never stepped onto that trail. They found his car. That was it. No shirt snagged on a branch. No scuff marks on the dirt. No cries for help, and worse, no evidence that he'd ever intended to vanish. His life was in perfect order. No debts, no secrets. He was due for lunch. He had plans that week. There was no reason to disappear. The coroner's report would later deliver its brutal simplicity. Place of death unknown. Cause of death undetermined. Date of death inconclusive. In legal terms, Meyer had effectively been erased by the forest. No beginning, no end. Just a space where he used to be. Theories flooded in. Some pointed to predatory animal. But the Yarra ranges, while wild, aren't lawless. Dingoes, yes, but no signs of attack. Others whispered of foul play, a chance encounter with someone hiding out in the woods. But why no evidence? Why no signs of violence? Then came the harder theories, the ones harder to accept. That something in the bush had taken him. Not a person, not a beast, something else. Something that knew how to move between trees without disturbing a leaf. Something that could erase a man cleanly, quietly, completely. And through it all, his family waited. Days turned into weeks. Grief hardened into something else. Frustration, disbelief, a need for answers. Press conferences were held. Maps were pinned. Theories debated. But Warren didn't come back. Not his voice. Not his bones. Some of the search team would later admit they felt watched in those woods. A strange stillness that moved with them. A pressure, low and subtle. Like something ancient and unseen was threading through the trees. Not malevolence, just awareness. Indifference. The Yarra swallowed Warren Meyer like it has swallowed others. Without struggle, without explanation, without return, and it waits still. When logic fails, when footprints end and time forgets, the mind begins to wander. In the Outback, where distance stretches past understanding and the land knows how to keep secrets, speculation takes on a sharper edge. People vanish, that's the truth. But how they vanish, that's where the bush begins to murmur back. The first theory is simple: nature. And in Australia, nature bites. Dingoes, wild boars, snakes that slip through grass like water, spiders the size of your palm. Death can be quick and quiet out here. One wrong step, one unlucky moment. Some believe these disappearances are nothing more than tragic miscalculations. A stumble into a gully, a twisted ankle, dehydration, heat stroke. The kind of ending that doesn't leave clues, just bones scattered miles from where they fell. But that explanation wears thin the deeper you look. In many of these cases there is no struggle, no scent trail, no broken vegetation. No clothing found months or years later by hikers or fires. Just silence, just space. And so the theories darken. Locals in remote regions talk about big cats. Panthers, black as sin, long and silent, eyes glowing in the scrub. Officially, they don't exist. But unofficially, reports go back decades. Farmers losing livestock in ways that don't match dingoes. Campers hearing low growls where no known predator lives. Shadows slipping through the trees too fast, too smooth, too deliberate to be a kangaroo or boar. Then there are older stories, far older. Aboriginal legends passed in whispers, rarely spoken to outsiders. Stories of the Yowie, hairy men of the bush. Not beasts, not ghosts. Something in between. Tall, muscular, smelling of rot and damp lead, seen on the edges of firelight. Always at a distance, always watching. Skeptics laugh, but they haven't stood alone in the middle of nowhere when the wind drops and every sound seems wrong. They haven't heard twigs snapping underfoot when no one else is near. They haven't felt their chest tighten, not from fear, but from knowing they are being studied, measured. Even seasoned bushmen have stories they won't tell in daylight. Stories of footsteps that mimic your own, of whistles in the dark, of waking in a tent to find claw marks in the dirt just outside the flap. Could these beings, real or imagined, be responsible for the vanishings? It seems impossible, but so does the alternative. So does a world where people disappear without trace, time and time again, in places where others walk daily without issue. Some even believe the Outback itself is alive, not metaphorically, but literally, that it selects, that it tests, that those who vanish aren't taken at random, but chosen by something old, something we've forgotten how to name. That there are thin places in the bush, places where the rules bend, where reality frays just enough to let something else in, or to let someone fall through. And if that's true, then the bush isn't just landscape. It's a predator. It's a gate. and we are walking too close to the edge. Not every ghost in the outback is born of nature. Sometimes, the silence that swallows people is human-shaped, the kind that walks on 2 feet, breathes the same air, smiles when it lies. When the sun sets and the fire burns low, this is the theory that causes the most unease. Not the creatures with claws or shadows in the trees, but the darkness we carry inside ourselves. Australia remembers names like Ivan Milat, the backpacker murderer, a man who lured young travelers into the bush under false promises, only to kill them where no one would hear the screams. He used the landscape as cover, as coffin, and he wasn't the only one. Over the decades, more names have emerged, some caught, others only suspected. The bush, with its vastness and silence, becomes a perfect accomplice. Some believe these disappearances, at least some, are acts of predation not by beasts, but by people. Those who understand the terrain, who know where to park without being seen, who time their movements with the turning of the weather. They wait, they follow, and they vanish, just like their victims. But the threat isn't only external. There's a theory more uncomfortable than any panther or killer. It's the theory that some people vanish because they choose to, not in a moment of fear, but of resolve. People who walk away from their lives with a full and terrible intention to never be found. Whether from despair, guilt, trauma, or the unbearable weight of living, they step into the bush not to get lost, but to disappear. Some do it quietly, slipping into the landscape like smoke. Others leave signs meant to be misread, abandoned cars, half-packed bags, texts sent too late. The line between victim and choice blurs, and for those left behind, that ambiguity becomes its own kind of torment. Could some of the vanished have built new lives elsewhere, under new names, in other countries or corners of the country? It's possible. The digital age makes reinvention harder, but not impossible, especially for those prepared, especially for those desperate. But even in these theories, there's still the matter of absence, total, clean absence. How does a person escape all record, all detection, all memory? How does one erase themselves so completely that even satellites and forensics fail? Whether taken by man, by creature, or by their own hand, the fact remains, these people are gone. Not just missing, but removed, as if by design. The human element doesn't make the outback any less mysterious. If anything, it deepens the shadows. Because when you start to think the real danger is walking on 2 legs, the bush feels colder. Not because of what lives there, but because of who. Behind every disappearance, there is someone left waiting. A partner staring at a phone that never rings. A mother glancing at the front gate every morning. A child grown into adulthood without the echo of a goodbye. These aren't just cases. They are wounds that don't close, days that never end, questions that circle the mind like vultures. The ones left behind live with the unbearable, the silence of not knowing. The families of the missing often speak of a unique kind of grief, one that has no funeral, no body to bury, no certainty to anchor sorrow. It's a grief suspended in frozen in time. Every phone call from an unknown number spikes the heart. Every news story rekindles hope. Every cold morning reminds them that somewhere, someone once walked into the... And there's the system. Cold. Overwhelmed, bound by procedure. In the early days, there is urgency. Search teams, helicopters, media coverage. But as time passes, interest fades, priorities shift, the files stack up, and the living are left to carry the weight alone. They chase answers through mazes of red tape, push for inquests, question half-hearted investigations, plead for renewed searches, and often, all they find is stonewalling. The official line, "There's nothing more we can do." But for those holding on to hope, that's not an answer. It's an insult. Some families become investigators themselves. They pore over topographical maps, interview witnesses, organize community searches. Others take to social media, turning their loss into a campaign. But no matter the effort, most are forced to live with a terrible compromise, learning to function while never giving up, keeping a plate at the table, leaving a porch light on. Communities mourn too. In small towns, a disappearance is not just an event, it's a fracture. People gather in candlelight vigils, churches fill with quiet prayers, flyers curl and yellow on telephone poles. And yet, the silence always returns. It wraps around these places like fog, heavy, unmoving. What makes it worse is the lack of closure. No one can say what really happened. Not the police, not the trackers, not even the bush. And so, speculation fills the gaps. Theories, ghost stories, hushed accusations. It all churns beneath the surface, beneath the grief. Some families begin to feel that they are grieving alone, that the world has moved on, but they can't, because until there is a body, a voice, a final image, there is always the chance that maybe, just maybe, they're still out there, waiting, hiding, lost, kept. And that's the fear that lingers like smoke. What if it wasn't an accident? What if the land didn't just let them go? As these stories unfold, raw and unresolved, something has become unmistakably clear. This isn't just content, it's memory, it's grief, it's truth wrapped in silence. And you, the ones watching, listening, commenting, you've demanded something real. Not spectacle, not dramatization, but respect, accuracy, and above all, authenticity. Outback Confessions began as a whisper in the dark, a place to collect these strange stories, to shine a light where the bush refuses to yield. But what it's become is something deeper, a conversation across time zones, across towns and deserts, a place where mystery meets memory, and where the Australian Outback is not just a backdrop, but a character in every tale. You've asked for more than the surface. You've asked for real places, real accents, real names, and we hear you. No more stock footage of some generic pine forest when we're talking about the ochre cliffs of Northern Territory, or the skeletal gums of Victoria's high country. No more voices that don't know the weight of dust in the lungs, or the hush that falls just before the wind shift. This project is for you. It's for the families who still check their voicemails hoping. It's for the wanderers who never came home. It's for the rangers who won't speak publicly, but send quiet emails full of coordinates and warnings. It's for the old men at pubs who remember too much, and the kids who grew up with missing persons posters instead of fairy tales. And now, we want to grow with you. Expand the map. Document new cases. Revisit old ones with fresh eyes, better tools, and deeper empathy. There are more mysteries waiting. Whispers from Arnhem Land, sightings in the Flinders Ranges, campfires gone cold in the Pilbara. If there's a secret buried in this soil, we'll find it. But we can't do it alone. We need your stories, your theories, your corrections. If we get a detail wrong, tell us. If there's a place we've overlooked, point us there. Because truth in the Outback isn't found in police reports. It's passed down in fragments, in overheard conversations, in scars and silences. This isn't just a channel, it's a shared ledger of the uncanny, a logbook of the lost. And as long as there are stories to tell, Outback Confessions will keep digging, through dust, through archives, through memories, always searching, always listening. So, what do you want to hear next? The Outback doesn't end. It stretches beyond where maps grow vague and where signal dies mid-sentence. It doesn't speak in headlines or timelines. It speaks in silence, in gaps, in stories half told by firelight. And the enigma that pulses beneath its red skin, it still waits, still watches, still takes. You've heard their names now: Conrad Whitlock, Niels Becker, Warren Meyer. And they are only a few. There are dozens more, hundreds. If you dig through the layers of records, missing person flyers, cold cases that never made the front page. Some are etched into plaques, others remembered only in the fading memories of family. But they all walked into the same truth, that the Outback doesn't always give back. And so, this is your moment. Not to solve the mystery, but to keep it alive. If you've felt something out, if you've heard a story that never made it online, if you've walked a trail where the air turned wrong, share it. Speak it. Let it breathe. The truth out here isn't buried deep. It's just scattered, piece by piece, across time and terrain. And sometimes, all it takes is one more voice to make the pattern clearer. Comment your theories, share your stories, add your questions. Because every time you do, this web grows stronger, more intricate. The darkness shrinks back a little, the forgotten get remembered. And don't forget, subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell, not just for the clicks, but because these stories matter. They're not entertainment, they're echoes. And if we stop listening, we risk losing not just the missing, but the meaning they carried. If you know a case we should cover, tell us. If you live near a place that's whispered about, walk us through it. If you remember something strange from years back, write it down. Because somewhere out there, someone still waits to be found. Until then, stay alert. Be prepared, respect the silence, and remember, the outback is not empty. It is patient, it is watching, and it never forgets.